So to set some expectations for this session, this is not a workshop, so I won't be spending the whole time in code. So even if there are some non-React people in here, you would still get something out of the session because we will be talking about some conceptual stuff. I'll be talking about some ways to consult your clients about animations, some ways to help them talk about best practices and ways to get the most bang for their buck and stuff like that. The code demos do assume you know at least basic React, but the animation stuff that we'll go into will be the basics. So with that said, welcome to jazz up your React site with animations. And I promise this is the most obnoxious that my slides will get. So I'm Anastasiya Flynn, hello. I've been doing professional development since 2011, and that was mostly .NET and vanilla JavaScript, so pre all this exciting and new hipster front-end framework stuff. I had to learn vanilla JavaScript and the native DOM API, which is pretty good because you learn, how to do stuff the real way, and then you learn all the abstractions on top of it. I mostly worked for agencies, so when I talk about how to help your clients, that's the experience that I'm talking about. Just kind of keep that in mind. I live in New Hampshire, and I'm a crazy cat lady, so if you want to come talk to me about your pets, that's always welcome. I currently work for a company called Sitecore. We are a global company with offices all over the world. We have many partners who implement our software. It is a marketing software with crazy personalization features. So if you are in the job market, we released a JavaScript API for our platform. This is my evangelism team. We are the technical evangelists, and I love my team. They let me do cool stuff like this, like travel from New Hampshire, talk to you guys about JavaScript. So just wanted to say thank you to them. And if you like this talk, just call me out on Twitter, call out Sitecore, let them know. If you hate my talk, come talk to me or message me and let me know how I can do better. I would appreciate that. So, web animations. What is it exactly? Web animations can be as subtle as slight motions, like unhover motions on your button, a spinning of the closing X in your modal, tiny things, to full in-your-face modals, a whole video playing, a whole GIF of the interface of the product you're about to purchase. It can be small or big things. I just wanted to set the context of what we're about to talk about because animations mean different things to different people. When I was thinking about animations, I was kind of thinking about why do we even have them and why are we even trying to bring this concept of realism to the web. And it's because in the real world, our brain is processing data with different senses. We have our eyes, our ears, touch. When you push a button in the real world, there's going to be a sound. Like I'm thinking of an old school phone, like a corded phone or your TV controller. Like there will be a little audible sound. And I know because if I keep clicking it, my cat will attack it eventually. And you will feel it and you will see a change in the depth of it. But in your screen, you don't have that. So you need some kind of context to know that something happened, so that when you're making a payment and you click, okay, continue or make payment, and you're just sitting there, you don't keep pressing that stupid button all over again. So it's the animations are filling those gaps of the missing senses in the digital world. There's alternative to JavaScript animations. JavaScript is not the only option. And I won't go into too many details about the alternatives because that's not what this talk is about. But I just wanted to have one slide in here about what the alternatives are and the pros and cons of them, and to call out this good article that goes into more depth about that. So just because you can add animations doesn't mean that you should. And as developers, sometimes you're getting a small project and you're doing everything from design to implementation, but I'm thinking about the bigger projects where the client comes and they've already hired a design agency and you already get the wireframes or the finished design and you're just in charge of implementing it. So you just have to take what they give you and now break it up into stories and go and work with it. So the client doesn't know what's available out of the box with the animation libraries and what's custom. So you have to analyze what's actually adding value and what's kind of frivolous. So here are some guidelines about which animations are adding value to your end user and are actually worth the money, and what's just kind of there for pizzazz. So there's the microaction animations. These are the ones that communicate status and provide feedback to your user. Like, for example, yes, the button was clicked. A really good example is the password strength bar, the one that fills up as the password gets stronger. They help users see the results of their actions. So especially on a slow connection, especially on mobile, they know that something is happening. It keeps the user engaged with your site. It makes your site more fun to interact with. There's the navigation type of animation. This could be navigating from page to page. So like a page transition type of animation. And this could be setting the context. So like maybe they were on a like shopping type of pages, so they were browsing products. Now they're in a shopping cart. So like you want to just animate that change so that now they know they're in a totally different context. But now they're on the final screen and you really want to make that look different so they know they have to pay attention because this is the final page. So you can really make that transition different and even make that whole page look different to really grab their attention. So those types of animations have a purpose. But there's the in-page types of navigation transitions. So for example, as they're scrolling, different things can pop into view, which because now it's really popular to have those really long pages with a lot of data, and they may not know where to look, you're kind of guiding the story of where they should be looking, where the important call to actions are. In marketing terms, it's like where your company's goals are, because the company is measuring where the clicks are and where you want them to go. So by having animations around those hot areas, that's where you're guiding where the user's eyes go, where you want them to click, where you want them to focus on. So next is the loading animation. So if you actually have, and this isn't to make up for bad code on your server, if you actually have a reason to have stuff happening on your server that takes a long time, so you add something, some kind of loading GIF or something to give perceived performance. So the user knows something is happening. So they don't just think the site is frozen, and they still feel engaged. So the improved performance is if you combine the scrolling and the animating of items with something like the usage of the intersection observer API, which then you can use animation with lazy loading to actually improve the performance of your page. Finally, we have welcoming animations. So this is used to provide a personalized experience. This is really important for building the user's connection to a brand. And this kind of psychology is important to long-term customer retention. And the last one is just those big videos and GIFs. And this is technically an animation, and I think the best usage of this is when it demonstrates some kind of visual aspect of a product, where the visual aspect is a key differentiator. Like you want to show how simple your interface is, or you want to show how simple your product is to use, like something, you don't want to just have a big wall of text. So if you're not sure if the animation is good to use and you want to try to talk your client against it or for it, this is kind of the simple test. Does it make the content or interface easier to navigate? Does it add additional information that otherwise wouldn't be clear to the user if the animation wasn't there? Does it reduce cognitive load for the user? Like, for example, does it help them to remember where they came from or help them to understand the context of the site or of where they are? And does it make sense financially? I keep coming back to this because your customers don't know what's out of the box and what isn't. And you're never just told, like, yeah, just keep building and don't worry about the money and, we'll just keep going until you get it right. You either have a deadline or you have a budget, and when the budget is gone, you reevaluate if the client wants to renew it. So you have to keep that in mind when you get your designs. So before was the animations that are generally a good idea, and these are the ones that you generally want to question. So the pizzazz, the ones that are just decorative, that just add excitement to your layout without real business value to your end user. Performance theater, this is the loading ones where the justification for them is in there, where there really is a problem in the back end that you should address. And the data density, so I think right now animations, like I sometimes see them used to layer data on top of each other. Like, for example, I've been to a shopping website where the search results for your tiles, and then to view more information about that search result, instead of having a modal, you click on the tile and it flips over and it has a whole lot more data on it, and then you can go to the page. And there's so much animation happening and so much data, and it's really jumpy, and it jumps your scroll, and they're just trying to pack so much data into that page. They're layering and layering and layering and using animation to reveal different layers of data, and it's just too much. So, spread it out. Use all of the real estate. It's okay to make people scroll. All right, and finally, these are guidelines, not laws. So it's important to know that you can break all of these, but you just have to know your audience. Like, some of the ones that I said are bad, I'm going to show examples of breaking them, because on a website for a developer audience, just because I think devs just like seeing cool animations. So, know your audience, know what your customers' business goals are and what their priorities are. So in some cases, it's okay to break the rules. All right, so let's check out some examples. So this is the Gatsby documentation site. I use Gatsby for my personal blog. On their documentation, they have this little pop-up thing for if the page was helpful. And instead of just having a poor, fine, great, as you hover over it, it shows you an emotion. And if you keep hovering over it, the emotion keeps bouncing. And that one, it even hides. It's really clear what you're selecting. So this one, it just helps people make the right choice. It helps to prevent user error, it communicates status, it provides feedback. This just hits all the right things about what a perfect micro interaction should be. And then the tiny spinny thing that closes the modal, you don't have to wait for it to finish spinning. You can still click on it and the modal will close. So the other important thing about animations is that a user shouldn't have to wait for them to finish animating. They should be asynchronous, and they shouldn't delay the user or interfere with the flow. This is also Gatsby, and this is a pizzazz animation, I think, because it's just kind of decorative. But what it's doing is it's showing the flow of the workflow, how you go from building your site to then adding the GraphQL queries, then adding your static files and your React stuff, and then you go to deploy and hosting your site on one of those providers. So this is an example where we're breaking the rules, where Pizzazz is a good thing, because it's clarifying the whole process of how this whole Gatsby thing works, and it's making the concepts of Gatsby more clear to new users. Now we're going to look at some animation libraries, and the two that we're going to look at, getting started with them is much easier than you might think. So how do we choose a library? I recommend looking deeper than just the feature set. There's some immediate concerns that you might want to look at, like what does the syntax look like? And you might want to evaluate the skill set of your team. Will this be easy for them to pick up? Do you have to buy a license? Does it cost? That kind of thing. Because usually people just Google, like, what are the top animation libraries 2019, and pick the top result. But once you add this to your project, you're going to have to maintain this for several years. So, do some research. Then there's the long-term thinking of, is it open source? How well is this maintained? Actually look at how often they're committing. React Spring, one of the ones we're going to look at, they moved so fast. When hooks came out, they added hooks support right away. So they must have been working on that while hooks was in beta. How detailed are their release and migration notes? This one is so important. Are there add-ons available from the community? Which brings me to, what is the community like? Do they have a Slack? Do they have somewhere to go to ask questions? Because if you're the only one on your team who's tasked with doing these animation stories and nobody else knows this library, who are you going to go to for help? So to introduce us to this library, to the first one we're going to look at, here's the use case for it. So this is from the Ionic Framework website. I really like their software, and they have a lot of animations on their homepage. That's why I'm looking at this. So it's a reveal on scroll library. And as you can see, things are being revealed as you scroll. And now all these images it's not lazy loading. They're already present when you load the page. So I'm going to show you how to implement this with React Reveal. The pros of this is that it's guiding the flow for the user, and it's breaking up sections of content and refocusing the user's attention. So React Reveal, that's their docs site and their GitHub. It's a really, really tiny library of animations for revealing elements. It's an alternative to modals and sticky navs. Basically, their thing is that they don't want all these in-your-face ways of grabbing the user's attention. They want a really subtle way to get your attention. And on their documentation site, they show examples of how to implement error messages with their slides in. So any use case for stuff that's not present on page load is what you can use their library for. They're cross-browser friendly, they support server-side rendering, SEO friendly, so they work with styled components. Here's the use cases. So anything that's not there on page load, like alerts, search results. So I'll skip the peeking at the docs because you guys can do that, and I will go straight to the demo. So what we're going to do is show how to add the reveal component to an existing site that already has a listing of React components on it. So this is my blog site, and on the home page I have a listing of recent posts. So First thing, what I'm going to do is npm install React Reveal. And so there it is. And so here's my recent posts component. And the way it works with Gatsby is you do a GraphQL query to pull your recent posts or whatever data you want to get. So I'm just upping the number of recent posts that I'm pulling on my homepage to 100, just so it's easier for us to see how the animation works. So I'm going to run Gatsby develop so we can see locally how the changes are happening. So now we see that there's a whole lot more posts on the homepage, but they're all still static. They're there on page load, and they're just loaded statically. So now I'm going to import the fade component from React Reveal. So the way that it works is the animation type that you want to use, that gets imported as a component. So they have fade and so there's fade, flip, different ways of doing the animation in. And for all of them, they're imported in just as components that you can wrap around your elements. So the API is very simple. And then for the options for the elements, those just get passed in as props. All right, so what the GraphQL query does is returns a list of results, and I map over them and insert them into the page. So what I'm going to do now is for every result, I'm going to wrap it with an instance of fade. And then I'm going to specify that I want it to fade in from the bottom. And then one thing to be careful is that since I had the key property here, because it was inside of a map, I have to move that key now to the fade component. And that is it for adding in the fade animation. So now as I scroll, things are fading in. So and then I wanted to show another option of fading in from the right because I think that looks better. There we go. I know, it's very stupid simple. There was another demo that I did. This is for showing search results. Search results for a bunch of user groups in my Sitecore community. And the problem there is that all of the user groups had pretty much the same metadata, so they were named very similarly. It was all like Sitecore user group and then the location. So when you searched for them, like it was very hard to tell that the search data was changing. So we wanted to add some kind of animation to show that like, yes, your data is actually changing. So the search is implemented on the React context API. And very similarly, I imported fade here. And whenever the search results change on the context, so here's the context search results set. So when I'm mapping over it, I wrap each result in fade. And here's the key, here's the bottom. I delayed each card by its position. That was needed because the images were taking some time to load. So the animations were kind of stacking on each other a bit if the delay wasn't there. And so the way that this looked was, what is this? Oh my God. Okay. Here we go. So it's a good use case to use for search results. All right, the next framework that we're going to look at is React Spring. So this is the fancy one. React Spring relies on physics-based animations, whereas many other animations libraries, they rely on CSS transitions or duration curves. If you've used maybe even jQuery or native animations functions, then you had to provide a time and an easing function. That's what I mean by durations. And the issue with the duration approach is that that's just not how animations look like in real life. So React Spring thinks about animations in terms of real physical properties. And the result is extremely smooth and realistic looking animations. So why React Spring? So it's cross-platform supported. It's got support for web, React Native Web. It's cross-browser supported. It moves really fast. It added support for hooks really fast. And it still supports the legacy React props API. So if your project hasn't upgraded to hooks yet, that's okay. It has a very similar API as styled components, which means that you pass in static data to initialize the animations, which is actually really great if you're not building static sites for the end user, but if you're building interfaces for businesses where the business has like knobs and config files where they customize stuff, and you end up with a bunch of static data from the business user that then you pass into the interface. Stuff like style components and any kind of frameworks that take static data and make magic happen is just perfect for that, if that makes sense. So now we're going to do a demo of this. So for this one, we're going to go into a blog post. And in a blog post, we have this left nav table of contents, and it doesn't move. So we're going to make it slide left and right. So first we're going to import npm install React Spring. And then so now on the post page, first I'm going to add a hook for use state, so I can keep track of whether the nav is open or closed. And so while that's happening, I'll just talk about the next steps. So two things that are going to get imported from the Spring library. The use Spring function and the animated function. So similarly to how in styled components where you do like style.div or you use styled as a function and you pass in a component and that happens outside of your main React render. So similarly here, you can do animated.div or animated and pass in the component. So like here, I'm passing in animated and I'm passing in my table of contents component. And the calculation of the physics, that's happening outside of your React rendering, and React isn't having to re-render that or manage that animated component. And that is great because it's giving us a lot of performance gains. So let me pause this and talk about this real quick. So what happened so far is that we replaced where I had the table of contents component with the new animated table of contents, which is the original table of contents wrapped with animated. But now, how are we animating this? So this is where the usage of the useSpring comes in. So I'm creating a constant, navSpring. So that's the useSpring function, and you can pass it a from with an object of the starting state and then a to with an object of the end state. And so here I'm using opacity because I wanted to demonstrate how these are both optional objects. And you can put whatever you want in here, like any CSS property you can think of. It can be boring things like opacity and color, and it could be exciting things like 3D transforms and whatever. So you can say to and then an object, or you can just take away the to, and React Spring will know implicitly that you mean that that's the end state. And then you can totally take away the from, that's also optional. And if there's no from specified, then React wants you to mount the component and then get to that state. So I added a comment there that from is the default state when it's mounting, and then it mounts and then it animates to the to property. But then if you don't have the from property, then it just starts at the to property. So now I'm just going to replace this with the thing we actually want to animate, which is the sliding of the nav bar. So this will be a transform. There we go. So animating the transform property. So if the nav is open, then we don't translate 3D at all. We keep it the same. And if the nav is not open, then we move that sucker over 200 degrees. And then I hooked up the state to a on-click button. And so here it is. So there's a lot more examples in the documentation. Use Spring is not the only hook available. There are a bunch of other hooks that we do not have time to cover. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about animation overkill, like the bad ways of using animation. So this is back to ionicframework.com. And, I don't have any beef with Ionic. Like I said, I like their software. So they have a simple list of 14 static elements that represent their top integrations. If you click on See integrations, you'll see that they have dozens more, but this is their top 14. And they're represented as these floating bubbles. And they just slowly float. And, so is this really so bad? So let's see. It really is a static list. I looked at the code. It doesn't change. If you reload it, it's always the same list, starting with PayPal. So I put a timer on it to see how long does it take for PayPal to get all the way around. And I'm going to speed this up for you so we don't have to wait. And then sometimes the bubbles hide other bubbles. And there it is. So it took almost 2 minutes for the whole thing to go around. So if this wasn't a site for developers, I would say, I would definitely tell my client, cut this. Like, I don't know how long this took to build, but it's not worth it. Since this is a site for developers, I mean, maybe they A/B tested this and found that devs think this is just so cool that it was worth it. That they get so many clicks on that integration link that it was just worth it. So this is one of those where, know your audience, or, yeah. This is from 2016, an animation of PayPal, so this might not be relevant anymore, but it serves my example. When PayPal is showing you the receipt, it has this opening flippy animation that, instead of just showing you the receipt, it like makes you wait for it. And the point is that you've been shopping, you're done with your transaction, like you just want to get on with it. So this animation just doesn't add any value. It's another thing that by skipping this, you could have just saved your client money. So just question to ask yourself when you're going over the specs with your client. Are you adding value? Are you helping your user? And this is how to gauge that. Is it delaying the workflow? To build this, are you having to bring in extra libraries that are making your JavaScript size bigger, or worsening your performance, or just distracting the user, causing elements jumpiness, hiding elements like those bubbles, increasing cost? So wrapping up, these are some other React animation libraries that you can explore. These are very popular, highly recommended. The code from today's work is here. I have a branch on my blog repository for the extra stuff I added, so that URL goes to the diff. The slides will be at that URL by Monday, and I will post the demos as well since they're pre-recorded. Here's some general resources. The way I learned about React Reveal is by looking at Gatsby starters. If you're kind of like on your own, if you're a freelancer, the best way to learn is by looking at other people's code. The way I heard about React Spring is by listening to the Syntax FM podcast with Wes Boss and Scott Chalinsky, and those are their web courses. That podcast is fantastic. Most of you probably heard of it. If not, check it out, it's awesome. This PowerPoint template is from Slide Carnival. They have free templates for personal and professional use. The cat on my demo slides is Claire. She's my baby. I adopted her from the Bughead PetSmart, so if anyone's local, get your animals there. If you saw the opening keynote about how you should specialize, I was inspired and came back and added this slide. So Sitecore, the company I work for, they recently added a JavaScript API to work with their software. And so not Sitecore, but all of our partners, there's a lot of agencies who just do Sitecore implementations, and they're looking for front-end devs front-end Sitecore devs. So if anyone is looking for a job, that's our documentation site for our framework, and that's the site to go to for a developer trial to see if this is something that's for you. And you can go on LinkedIn and just search for Sitecore React or Sitecore Angular, see what's out there. So that's it. Thank you.